Welcome everyone to another episode of the iWorkinSport live interview. This is the show where we talk to accomplished sport business professionals who come here to share their knowledge, experience, tips and advice in order to help you succeed in your career. If we're just meeting, my name is João Frigerio. I'm the founder of iWorkinSport, and I want to thank you for being here with us today. If this is your first time that you're joining one of our live interviews, let me know. Let me know in the comments, or let me know if you're coming back. If you're watching the replay, you can also leave your comments there. That will be great. And as you know, one thing that I always ask the people that are watching, if you can let us know where you're watching from, that would be great. We'd like to know that about you. So very quickly, if you don't know iWorkinSport, we're a platform to help you accelerate your career in sport. If you want to work in sport or you already work in sport, we're here to help you either way. So we organize events which connect you with recruiters in case you're looking for a job, or with sports management academic programs if you're interested in investing in education. So these programs can be a very effective way to enter the industry. By the way, we're organizing the Education Virtual Expo in just a few weeks. There is here an announcement about that. There on the 27th of October, and then the week later on the 3rd of November. So if you're interested in meeting some of the best programs in the world, just check it out, and we're going to have a very cool announcement about that event in the coming days too, so stay tuned. On top of that, you're watching us either on LinkedIn or YouTube, but we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find us as iWorkinSport, singular, everywhere. Now, let me introduce you to my guest. So today I will be speaking with Lars Haue-Pedersen, Managing Director of Global Sports Practice at Burson Cohn Wolfe, more known as BCW. It's easier to pronounce. So I've known Lars, since I was a student. I think we met in 2005. I was doing the FIFA Masters then. He was with TSC Consulting. I've been following his career ever since. And now, of course, with BCW. He's been working in the field for more than 20 years. He's a specialist in sports management and international sports events bids. So among many of the successful projects, and he's going to talk much more in depth about that, but he's helped the winning bids of LA 2028, of the Doha bid for the IAAF World Championships, or World Athletics in 2019, and of course the Poland and Ukraine UEFA Euro 2012 bid. So he's been doing that for a long time, very successfully. Also, BCW advises key sport leaders achieving their goals. We're going to talk a little more about that too. So, there's a lot to learn from him. I'm going to invite Lars to join me right after this. Where is it? Oh, there you go. Hello, Lars. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Hi, Joe. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Where do we find you? Where are you at the moment?
Well, you might see in the background here, I'm actually, in our daily life, we are in our office in Lausanne, Switzerland, but some days in this week, I actually spent in our summer house in my native Denmark. So that's why it's a bit of a country style around me here.
Great. I'm in Portugal this week. Should be in Lausanne soon, but I'm a bit here and there. And here's very good weather and good to see you. Oh, by the way, there is already a message here for you. And I'm going to invite everyone that is watching us again to let us know where they're watching us from. But I guess you know Sarah Lewis.
Yes, definitely.
A greeting to all. Looking forward to today's interview. And Sarah, I think we just need to schedule the date, right? She will be with us here as well very soon. In the coming weeks, more towards the end of the year.
Excellent.
Great. Lars, we're going to talk about many things today, but I will ask you to start, as I normally ask my guests, to give us a summary of your career. This is a show about career. We'll be asking for some advice, but tell us a little bit about you. What did you study? How did you start working in sport? Paint a picture to us, please.
All right, I'll try to give you a short version. So, I grew up here in Denmark. My academic background is economics. I have a Master of Science in Economics from Danish University. I then worked in sport in Denmark and within public sector. I then ended up working as the director, the CEO of the Danish Volleyball Federation, and was then offered a position in 1995 in the International Volleyball Federation in FIVB. And so that's why we moved to Switzerland, where we have now been, must be like more than 25 years. So I worked in FIVB for a good 3-4 years. Before I liked working in international sport, and I learned a lot by working in an international federation. I traveled the world. I could see the difference between Japanese, Korean, and Chinese. I couldn't read it, but I could see the difference. I understood for the first time how some people in East Africa speak English and West African French, etc., etc., etc. So it was a very good period of education and learning. But I also have to say that after 3-4 years in international federation, I got a maybe bit, how can I say, tired of the seasonal work. You know, if you work in international sports federation, it very often follows a certain seasonal flow. And I started to think about how can I use my experience. And maybe I also saw things when I worked in the FIVB and international sport. I saw things that I was thinking, I think we can do this better. And maybe sometimes it's easier to change from outside than from within. So together with one of our suppliers at that time, great guy, Robin Courage, who was based in London. He came from Saatchi and Saatchi Advertising. He and I started in 2002 what, as you mentioned, was then called TSE Consulting.
Right.
So the company actually started with 2 people. and we were 2, Robin in London, me in Lausanne, and I think we had a half-time secretary to support. So that was very, very small. We started very small.
Many companies do. Many companies start that way.
Many companies start small. I have a lot of respect for companies that start small. Unfortunately, as you might know, more than half of the companies that start small, they don't exist after 1 year. And of course, it's very difficult. We started with our clients. We had a little investment, but we managed to get through the first difficult year, and then it started just one step after another. It was very first learning point. I could never have done this alone, because my partner Robin Courage had different skill set, different view of things that I had. We were very complementary, and then it's developed and it took off, and it started to become very successful. And we grew. So we built a team in Lausanne, we built a team in London. And over the years, we started to set up small offices in many parts of the world. I think at a certain stage we had up to 10 satellite offices, from Singapore in the east to US in the west, South Africa, Scandinavia, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, etc., etc. It worked very well. Then during 2013-14, we were thinking, how do we consolidate all this? And we either Robin and myself would have to, and other partners had joined and had achieved partner status and equity. So either the partners would have to invest some of their own money additional in the company to build it further, or we would join a much bigger company that already had a network internationally, because we found out that without an international network, we could not really deal with the big projects that we were dealing with. In fact, we were always joking. Many of our clients at that time thought we were much bigger than we were.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an advantage, but that was definitely the case. So we came to the conclusion we have to catch up with reality soon. If not, we cannot continue this. So we said, let's explore if we could join a much bigger structure. So we had an investment firm, an investment bank, preparing for us, and they reached out on our behalf to like the big players in the industry. And after a process, it takes a lot of time. We were then so lucky and to be acquired by WPP, which is one of the largest communication groups in the world.
Yeah.
And in 2016, WPP acquired TC Consulting, and we were then at that time placed within what was called Burson Marsteller, which then in 2019 merged with another WPP company, Cohn Wolfe, to become Burson Cohn Wolfe, or BCW. So this was and there we have been there ever since.
Yeah.
Since 2016, and we have been very happy in BCW. We feel very good about it. It has been a very interesting journey, also for me personally, to basically start a company from complete scratch with 2 people and try to and learn how does a small company functions, what are the easier parts, what are the more difficult parts, and then now working in a large structure. I mean, WPP is 100,000 people, but just BCW is around 4,000 people worldwide. How does a very, very big company functions, and what are the easier part, what are the more difficult part? Yeah. So I guess that's the short track of what I had been through since starting working internationally in sport.
That's very interesting. I imagine that's at that time, I think it was 2002, when you said that you formed TSC, right?
Yeah.
FIVB wasn't so very uncommon, people leaving companies, federations to do their consultancy. But I think probably it's never been more popular than now. I mean, with how the world is changing, with I think COVID accelerated that as well, and people are getting used to having their own employees also working from home, almost like in a consultancy capacity. Sometimes it is common to have people now leaving their jobs, or unfortunately being let go because of the crisis, and then forming their own consultancy, if you will. Do you have one main advice to anyone that is thinking of doing something like that? For instance, when you did that, did you leave already with a project, maybe with a FIVB or a client, or you and Robin said, listen, we have this vision, this is what we're going to do, let's do it, and then we go after work?
I clearly remember we did not have a client, because I remember making a presentation to someone that I would think should be our first client at that time. And the person, who was a very clever guy, said, I really like what you are doing. I understand what you're offering. I think you will be doing great work, but I don't want to be the first. So I don't want to be Livingstone, kind of, I remember he said. So we did not have a client, but we had a very clear idea of what we would do and what would be our niche in the big market. And if I should give one advice for people who want to do that, is maybe you should have a client when you start. It makes you sleep better the first 6 months if you have it, I guess. But the more important is you know exactly what is your position in the market, and you identify that spot, and you don't question it, and you give it time. Our position in the market when we started was that we would be a consulting firm agency that would connect sport and the public sector, meaning cities, regions, countries, mainly in the field of events, bidding and hosting for events.
That was the vision from the beginning.
That was the vision from the very beginning, because I could see from my time in the International Volleyball Federation, and my partner Robin had a long experience in sports marketing and from Saatchi & Saatchi in commercial side, that the space where sport is connected to private sector, sponsors, television, was of course very crowded. And so there were, and there are today, a lot of companies with a long experience doing very high level in connecting sport and private sector.
Right.
This has been developed since Adidas started doing that 50 years ago. While in the connection between sport and the public sector, it's a new field. So there's a lot more need for advice and for external view. So that's where we stepped in, and that was a good decision. And we had, when we started to be successful in that area, we had many offers to help sport connecting with private sector. And very often we were a bit tempted, but we said no. And that was a good decision. You can say strategy is about what you choose to do, but it's very often defined by what you choose not to do.
Yeah, 100%. And just to go back sort of in the beginning, also because a lot of people that watch us are in the beginning of their careers. When you decided to move to work with sports, so with volleyball, even before forming your company, what was the main difference? I mean, between working not in sport and in sports? Is there one main difference that you noticed, and that you still note, or there aren't too many big differences?
That's a good question. I think it has changed a lot over the last 10 years, I would say, where organizations like your own organization, like iWorkinSport, the various sports management, educational programs, postgraduate programs, this whole ecosystem has developed a lot and has produced a lot of good people who were then employed in sport.
Right.
When I joined FIVB 25 years ago, my main qualification was that I understood volleyball. And that's kind of the only thing that they were looking for. I had a master degree in economics, but nobody wanted to see that. I didn't show any papers. I just had to explain what I thought about volleyball and beach volleyball and development. And all my colleagues at that time in FIVB, and I guess it was the same across national and international sports federations, they were hired based on the same process. Do you like the sport? Do you have passion for the sport? Do you understand the sport? Have you played yourself? That was the list of criteria, basically. And that has a certain strength and charm, but also huge weaknesses. I think in the last, as I said, at least 10 years, this has improved a lot, and it has become much more professional. And people are hired today based on their professional skill sets more than just their passion, if I may say so.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting. We, give advice to students or young professionals all the time. And one thing that we say, and not only myself, many people that came to the show and said, nowadays, saying that you're passionate about the sport, is not really an advantage, because you have hundreds of people applying and they all love that sport and they know that sport very well. So, the strong points will be something different. Lars, before we continue, just shout out to a few other people that are saying hi to you here. So there's Robert Casper in Austria. Hello, thanks for for watching. Taruka, she collaborates with us. She's based in India. Nayan in saying hi from Ireland. Jesus in France. And we also have Marco also saying hi from Serbia. So we span a few continents here. And for other people, Regina is saying hi from Brazil as well. And thanks for watching. And anyone watching on LinkedIn as well, you can leave your comments. And it's great to know where you're watching from. Now, Lars, let's continue a bit now with your current work. So what is now the position that you are with BCW? What's your job like now?
So when we were acquired by WPP and placed within BCW, it was with a clear focus that we would provide a sports arm to BCW. BCW is a big communication firms operating worldwide in 3 major divisions in 80 countries and covering many industries, doing PR and communications in healthcare, in consulting, in banking, tourist industry, a lot, but did not really focus on the wider sports industry. So we were set up, and that's what the unit I am leading today as the global sports practice of BCW. And that global sports practice is headquartered in Lausanne, Switzerland, where we have the core team. But then we have, I have around 25 plus people around across the world that are working with us on the various sports projects. So it's part of a network. We have a sports network within the network. And so whenever there is a major sports related project in BCW, could be a major bid for an event or a big communication campaign for hosting major events, etc., it would be managed by us in Lausanne, Switzerland. And then we would do it in cooperation with the various markets that would be involved.
Right. Great. And so of the things that you're doing now, what is it that you really like about your job? What makes you, get up every day in the morning?
I like a lot of things about my job, which is very, again, if you're working in an advisory role as a consultant or agency, you need to like to do many different things at the same time. If not, you shouldn't do it. There's a big advantage there, because it never gets boring, because the first 2 hours in the morning you could be talking to people in the Middle East about bidding for a major event. Then midday you might have a workshop about an event activation strategy for a Scandinavian country. And in the afternoon, you are thinking about how could some cities in North America be part of the FIFA World Cup 26 selection, etc. So the big advantage is that you do many things, even different things during the same day, and it never gets boring. If you like that, you should do the job that we are doing. However, there's pros and cons and everything. The negative side is, which maybe I've started to feel that a little more over the years, is that you never really have time to fully dive into something and really look at it very carefully and do a lot of research and really spend hours, leave it aside, think about it, get back to it, do a little more research, and then you might come up actually with a better solution. The problem is the clients don't have time for wait for that, and they don't really want you to pay you for all kind of additional research. Sometimes yes, but I see very often some of our new people joining, and we ask them to look into something, and then after 2 days I ask, so what do you have? And then they say, but I've just started. I need more time to research. I've just started the initial thinking. I said, you have till tomorrow, please. And that's the condition. And as I said, it has its upsides, and it has its less, not downside, but I could see myself some years from now moving into a position where I could spend more time on a fewer topics,
right,
and really getting into the details of it, such as event hosting. Why should cities actually host events? There's a lot of talks here and there, but no one or very few have really looked into that and tried to quantify what exactly is it that makes a successful hosting compared to less successful, mainly in terms of international media coverage and reputation.
But you're surely given this some thoughts.
A lot.
So maybe even if not backed by all the numbers and data that you would like to have, give us a glimpse maybe of.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm very
quite interesting question.
Yes, and it's something I'm very much, or we in BCW are very much focused on right now, and we're actually going to launch, because we do need to spend time on research. We're going to launch a research project end of this month, I think, where we are surveying up to 100 cities worldwide that are active in event hosting. And the topic is, and this is what I'm very focused on right now, is many cities spend quite some money in attracting events and hosting them. And the purpose is to, if I may say so, get on the map, to become known for something outside their region, maybe outside their country, to get an international profile. So brand awareness, and you need to do that getting coverage on mainstream media or maybe social media. But does it actually happen? And this is what we're trying to get, not to find the ultimate answer, but knowing more about it, because our hypothesis is it doesn't not happen very often. There are so many events, even on high level, organized at the same time, that many of them, they don't get much traction outside the core home market. And this is kind of a fact. We can see that from just analytics, just checking, different tools we use, where you can follow and quantify the media coverage. But why doesn't it happen? And are there other ways for those host cities to do it in a more strategic, meaning more focused and a bit smarter way? Like an example, a city in a country will host a big event. They must realize that they cannot get coverage around the world from that event. But maybe they don't need coverage around the world. Maybe they would need coverage in 5-10 countries where that city would have some tourist, business, investments interest, attracting students, etc., all kind of things. So this is one area we are now, and I'm very much interested in that. And we are now in BCW doing some research into that in order to advise cities that are hosting events. How can they do that and get that international recognition in a much more effective way?
Right. That's good to know. I'll be following that. Just to keep you updated, and a few other people saying hi here. We have another one from Brazil. Otacílio is here. And Mimo Moijin, I think, says, hi Lars, we almost worked together for the Spanish Liga, setting a blue ocean strategy for them. Regards from London. This is Moises Jimenez.
Mm-hmm.
So I presume you know him. By the way, if Moises or everybody else, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to, you're enjoying this, you want to hit the like button, that would be great. Appreciated. And let me just go back to a few questions. Oh, and I actually want, before I go to my questions, I want to tell anyone that if you have questions for Lars, please, don't be shy. We're here for that as well. Lars, and what about COVID? I mean, how did you go through that, and how BCW went through that? How did that impact your work?
I would say a lot from a business perspective, because we are in the event industry. Our main business focus is to help cities, regions to attract events and to get media coverage from hosting these events. So the whole business of bidding and hosting, mainly the hosting part, was of course very complicated. I remember in the beginning of 2020, when we outlined a lot of projects we were involved in during 2020, from the Euro football to the Ice Hockey World Championships, cycling, swimming, all kind of things. And just from March, month by month, they all just disappeared. So this was a maybe not difficult, but it was a complicated time. We were lucky. We are part of a large company, so we could kind of change a little our attention into also the non-sport sector, and we could help, because other BCW companies were doing fantastically. If you were advising in the healthcare industry or pharma, suddenly there was tons of new work coming in, of course. Yeah. So we could adjust there, but it was just very complicated, and it continued into this year. I thought that this would be over in terms of having an effect on business and the whole event market by early 21, but it continued. And I would say it continued almost into the middle of this year. I think that the fact that IOC managed, and I don't know how, and if people understand how big an accomplishment it was, together with the Tokyo organizers, to actually stage the Olympic Games in the middle of a pandemic. But the fact that they managed to do that was really important for the entire industry. It sent a very strong signal that yes, it's complicated, but we can deal with it. And that the fact that the games were organized and organized well provided a lot of courage for other cities, regions to say, okay, then we also move ahead with our plans. So it was complicated, but it was the first time that we actually, the industry in which we work, were facing a huge crisis. During the financial crisis in 2008-9, it was not that, it didn't influence the entire sports event industry that much. But this time was really complicated, and it will still have an impact, not so much on cities, regions in terms of their event work, but I think more on sports organizations. Many of them have really had a hard time and have lost a lot of revenues during both 20 and 21.
So when you talk about events, and I do much smaller events and work with companies that do events as well, many of them adopted digital solutions. Was that something that you guys started to work with as well? Of course, not to host competitions digitally, but you have clients organizing congresses and that kind of thing. Is that something that you worked a lot with?
Yeah, it's funny you mention it, because like 1 or 2 months before COVID started, must have been beginning of 2020, BCW globally started to use Teams. And I did not know what Teams was. I heard about it. and the idea was to move all, of course, meetings, but also filing, all kind of things on this so-called Microsoft Teams platform, which I have never really heard about. So we were actually up and running a bit when it just started, and we had to move everything there. And that also meant that, of course, we moved meetings. We started to have which is already now a bit old-fashioned. Yeah, webinars, just the word webinar. It's something that was very smart a year ago. Now it's like tried that, done that, and it was good. However, it does not replace on-site gatherings.
Yeah.
Sport is, by definition, from an athletics point of view, meeting in competition. You can do e-sport, but all other kind of sports, you are there. And because of that, I think there is a long tradition, and I think it's okay that you also have gatherings. You have meetings, conferences, congresses, and I have really been missing all that. I like to go and see clients and sit with them. Of course, you can save time and money by talking as we're doing now. But my experience is a lot more ideas come out of meetings when you are together, etc. So I now start to travel again. I used to travel a lot, many days per month, and suddenly for a year or plus I did not. And okay, that had some advantages, but now it starts to come back. And I look at my agenda for the next 3 weeks. I go Scandinavia, I go to Canada, I go to Belgrade, and I kind of like it. I have to say.
Yeah, it's nice to be on the move, but it's also, I think, nice to understand that you don't really have to travel that much either, right? I think it was maybe a bit too much. There's a lot that you can probably solve digitally, but as you said, it is very, very important to be there. There's already a question here also from by Moises. I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you one that I believe you might have answered a few times already. But is there a main lesson that you learned from this crisis, the pandemic?
Well, I think if one lesson, which I mean, of course, there's many lessons on a, let's say, on a tactical level, that you can do Zoom team meetings. You don't need to meet physically. You can engage with clients instead of meeting with them on site monthly. We now meet with them weekly in a virtual setting. But that's kind of all tactical adjustments, if I may say so. On a more strategic level, I think one learning point is that if you are helpful to clients, useful, if you have a role to play in the market, because what you do is something that clients appreciate and it can improve their performance, it doesn't really matter what kind of crisis come. You can still be helpful. That advice is still needed, and this means that if you think you're doing the right things, and you have some experience in doing it over some years, and it works, it will also work after a crisis. So just stay tuned and believe in yourself. And then it brought, the whole crisis brought a little back to me this, which was already discussed before the crisis in management terms of resilience. Companies can be very smart, they can be really innovative, they can do cool stuff, but at the end of the day, when the wind blows, it's the resilience part that makes the difference. And some companies, and I dare to say we are one of them, are just more resilient than others, meaning also the people working for them from top level all the way have a certain resilience. And I learned to appreciate that even more than I did before the crisis.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I presume that also adaptability, it's super important as well, because as you said, if you provide a service and you're useful to your clients, they will keep you. But I imagine that you have to remain useful to that client, but probably doing something else. You could not do exactly the same thing, need to adapt to the circumstances. Is that correct? Or
yeah, but again, that's more on a tactical level. You can either go to fly to them and sit with them and be helpful, and if you can't do that, okay, then you can have a Zoom call, a Teams call, and be helpful. It's a big difference. But again, your helpfulness, if it's still there, you will also be helpful if you do the same things during different channels. And each channel has pros and cons. I would say that working with one thing I learned during the pandemic in terms of dealing with clients was in many ways, I don't know if it was better, but it was somehow the same level because, as I said, the interaction with clients, the frequency went up a lot. Again, we could have a monthly on-site meeting, including flying somewhere, costs, pollution, etc. Now we didn't have that, so we had a weekly virtual meeting, not the same quality, but definitely much higher quantity, and it offset, I would think, the lack of quality. So that was important. Where I think the pandemic for a company like ours was more problematic, was actually internally. The fact that people could not meet, even the project teams, our project teams could not meet in the same room for a year and sit and discuss and develop interesting ideas, which is so difficult to do on a team Zoom call, was problematic. Having new people joining was even more problematic.
Yeah.
We had people joining from other countries coming to Switzerland. In the pandemic, they started sitting in their apartments, small apartment, alone 3 months, being on endless introduction team calls. It's not good.
No,
and this is still an issue, I think, that we have not, of all the discussions and learning points about a hybrid working model or home office, is the fact, how do you effectively onboard new people? That is difficult, and we haven't found a solution for that yet.
Yeah, definitely. Big question. Now, here the question by Moses Jimenez. He asks, do you think that the pandemic will be considered by the IOC when thinking about the Paris game? I'm going to presume that you're going to say yes, so I'm going to add up a little bit and ask you also how what you think are the main things that could be taken into account.
Well, I mean, no one knows, but overall, I think we have to be very careful not to overestimate the implications of the pandemic going forward. What I can see is people are just eager to get back to what they were doing and doing it in the same way before the pandemic. People are now in the thousands going to the football stadiums in Europe, and they are standing next to each other without a mask, screaming and shouting exactly in the same way as they did it 2 years ago. The only difference is that they have to show, in some countries, an app to get into the stadium, and they might need to clean their hands when they get in, which is a good thing anyway. But apart from that, and watching it on television, I don't see a thing of difference. Not a thing. So I basically believe that what people like to do before the pandemic, they like to do after the pandemic. And what will change in the event industry is that there will be a new chapter in the event manual. There were many chapters, security, accreditation, transportation, etc., safety. Now there will be a new chapter called health or something like that, where the rights holders, IOC and others, will give guidelines on where should you wash hands and provide maybe masks for people or whatever. But that's kind of right now the only concrete difference I can see. I don't think it will. Many things changes in life anyway, but in terms of sport and sport events, where the pandemic will have, let's say, longer term implications, apart from that extra chapter in the event manual, which is one of many, I'm not sure. I think we have to be careful not to talk too much about there'll be a brand new normal for events going forward. I'm not sure. I don't see it. I watch football. I open the it looks exactly as 2019.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Moses, for the question. And by the way, let me remind anyone that is watching, if you want to ask questions, you have the priority here. So I do have questions prepared, but if you send them, we will get to them. So Lars, is there any sort of, you mentioned, of course, that working on new projects. Are there any exciting one that you can tell us about, what you're working on, or are they all a bit secret at the time?
It's funny you mentioned, because when we are hiring young graduates to BCW Sports, we explain about the job, and then I used to say, and what is interesting about working for us is that you are involved in very high profile projects. If you work for a major bid for a FIFA World Cup or a UEFA a Euro, or you are engaged in a campaign to try to have a sport joining Olympic Games, it's very high profile. You are meeting very important people and politicians and influencers and sports stars and part of the presentations. But then actually when they start working, we very often cannot talk about it, because we have an advisory role. We are behind the scene. We don't promote ourselves. We give all the space to the client.
Right.
So we are working on a wide range of projects in sports that includes bidding for major events, mainly in football, because football is one of the sports where they're still having both on European, Asian, world level. They have it's a tradition to do a bidding competition, like in a very traditional way, but also now a very transparent way, while other sports have moved more into a so-called dialogue phase, where it's being discussed and then it's decided. So in those projects, we are very much involved. We are working with cities, regions that have already secured the events, and we are advising them on how can they get the most out of that hosting, mainly in terms of creating a profile and becoming internationally recognized as an interesting sports city. So it's a bit difficult for me, actually. And in most agreements we have, there is a confidentiality clause.
Let's talk in general for us to understand a little better the business of BCW Sport. So when a bid comes, or you're helping a city, is that through a federation there? For instance, Judo World Championships or Swimming World Championships, is that through their national swimming federation, or is that with the city directly? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a bit different from one place to another. We are very much focused on talking to cities as a public sector, and we have a very strong network. I think we have a list of 600 cities that we have been in contact with over the years, and there's a lot of referring business. Those cities move on, they bid for something, they host it, then they use that experience to do something else, bid for a next one, and this is our kind of preferred route. And that's also the way where I think a place can work in this market in a more effective way, when they're constantly looking forward to the next, and they keep building layers, and they do it in a better and better way, they will be more and more beneficial for the place. But sometimes it's a sports organization. That could mainly be in football. In football, they have very strong national federations.
Yeah.
And very often an idea to try to have a FIFA World Cup men or women, or a Euro, or an AFC Asian Cup coming to your country, the initiative often originates from the National Football Association.
Yeah.
But we do many other. I mean, that's the whole bidding part. I would say we are turning our attention a lot to the hosting part, where we, as I said, we think that many host cities can get much more targeted, have a much more targeted approach in the way they promote their place using the event, than just sending out some press releases worldwide. It will just not materialize in any substantial coverage, and they might not need it. We are really advocating the thing that if a city, a region, or a country is hosting even a quite big event, don't try to become famous all around the world, and you don't need it. But if you select your 10, 15, maybe markets around the world where it's important for you to be more known, you do that. And that's where we, with our network and our experience, we have, I think we're very helpful there. And this is kind of maybe becoming the bigger part of the business also.
You still do work with federations, I mean, on their strategy, communications as well?
And then we have that where we are this little side that is not business stream, where we actually, that's where we originated from in the beginning with TC Consulting, and we still advise federations on kind of their long-term planning and their overall positioning, because once we think it's interesting, and we have helped quite a lot of international federations, from a bigger one like swimming, athletics, basketball, to others in like now wrestling, archery, and also the winter sports, biathlon, skiing, and we always enjoy that work, and I think we can provide some very useful experience from other similar projects, but also from a business development point of view, it helps us, or it maintains our strong network within international sports industry, right, and within international federations, which are, of course, the main target of all our city clients when they want to attract events. So it is something we are still doing for sure.
And are there big trends that you think will matter to all of these clients of yours that you mentioned, especially on the federation side? Whether the cities or federations, I'm thinking, blockchain, NFTs, tokenization, whatever there is. Is there any area like this that you think that everybody needs to pay attention now? Or
I think that yes, again, blockchain, digital transformation, etc. It's really important. But again, I view it somehow as a tactical level. It's just a way of doing what you are doing in another way, and maybe in a better way. Very important, but it's not really strategy, I think. I mean, strategy is about defining the frame of who you are and what you want to do and achieve. And I think there, one of the big questions, one of the big challenges for both national and international sports federations is, how do they define their role in this new world of transparency, difficult questions about gender, about inclusivity, about sustainability, all those big questions where now organizations are being asked to have an opinion about questions which they would in the old days say, but that's politics, it's not us, we're just sport. Today, right, it's impossible for them to say, it's not us, it's just sport, it's just politics, we are just sport.
Yes,
you have to deal with it. Right. We saw that during the Euro with the pride colors in the stadium in Munich, and should it be there? There's the whole FIFA discussion about Qatar, but these are just small. There's the whole World Athletics about gender and IOC about transgender. This is just the beginning.
Yeah,
and the international federations and the national federations can no longer say it's not us. We just who scores the first goal and that's it. That requires a strategic overhaul, because it's not only I'm maybe painting it as this is a problem for the sport organizations, but I see it more as an opportunity for the sport organizations to play a much bigger role and increase their scope and their circle of influence if they get it right. But if they don't get it right, they will just be placed on the sideline as old-fashioned, and some others will move forward with it.
Right. Lars, I do have another a couple of questions, or a few questions here about more targeted to career advice for people that are looking to enter the sports market. So we're going to talk about that. But I just received a very interesting question here from Alessio Pietra. He asks, what's the first question you ask, or the first thing you look for when I suppose you propose a new project?
You mean when a client comes to us, or?
Yeah, or when they propose a new project.
Well, it's a good question. And well, our first question is, who are you? Precisely. Because that's a big difference when we were a very small company and independent, and now being part of a very big company listed in US. We have to be very sure that we are doing things in the right way. So the first question is, who are you? Can you show which organization you are? What's your record? Can you please fill in this form with a lot of questions where you prove that you are doing business in the right way, and this is a proper organization that a company like BCW can work with? So that whole compliance part suddenly played a big role for us, and I have to be honest and saying, in the beginning I thought it was really irritating, kind of. Why do I have to waste time on those questions? But I have come to realize that this is really important, and it's a little part of running your business in a purposeful way. We have to do good things, and we have to do good things because that's part of compliance regulations, but also we want to do good things, and we don't want to do things that are not correct. We don't want to work for people who are not good people, if I may say so. So this is our first. This is the first question. It's a compliance question on a legal level, but also on a more, I don't want to put myself up there, but also on a more ethical level. You cannot run a solid business and hire good people who want to do a good job if they don't feel they're doing something which is correct and which is good. And that has become important for us.
All right. Okay. And what about when someone wants to go and work for you? So tell us, what is it that you look for when hiring someone?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, but if I should say one thing, and this is something I learned when I was a volleyball coach on high level many years ago, and I never forget when, I mean, and this is like 40 years ago, maybe not 40, 30 years ago at least, when I was making a selection for the team, and there was, for the last position, I had two players. One was very talented, but maybe not really, I don't know if you could really trust him always. The other one was okay talented, but not as much, but he was just a hard worker, team player. And I picked the first one. I picked the more talented because I thought that's better for the team. And it turned out to be a mistake. And I learned from that. I always, the first thing I have ever since kept in mind that you can be creative or you can be analytical, you can be very structured, or you are more philosophical, and you can all kind of, it's fine. But there's no replacement for hard work. And this is kind of the first test. Are you willing to work hard for your clients, for your company, for your colleagues, and for your own career? But in that order. You have to do whatever you can do for your clients, company, colleagues, career. If you have that, then of course some people are extremely talented. Then they can combine that with hard work. It's even better. Some people are maybe less talented but bring something else, but there's no replacement for hard work, and that is an entry permission to play hurdle you have to pass if you should work with someone like me.
Right. Thank you, Lars. We're actually just getting to the hour mark, so if we can ask just a few more questions, a few more minutes. So for people that are looking for a job now and with a crisis and everything, where would you say are the opportunities?
I think the opportunities are where they always were. I think it's just important, if I should give an advice to young people who would like to work, let's say, in sport, and because many people would like to work in sport. If I may say this, and I understand that, but if I may say, there's two things I would say if you want to work in sport. What should you have in mind? First of all, you're not going to enter the locker room, if I may say so. Because you work in sport does not mean it's all sport around you. There are a lot of boring meetings and reportings and strategy sessions and internal stuff and so on and so on. It's a work. It's a professional environment you are entering. It might have a strong, passionate element, and you might see cool things, and you might be involved in with high-level projects, and it's good, but it's a work. Then you can do sport in your leisure time and watch football or whatever, or basketball, but it's a job. Don't mix it with, let's say, social life. So it's a job. Second, I see many young people who want to enter sports world, including our company, and then they think that what they can really add value is to tell us something about sport. In our case, something about events, hosting, bidding, communication in sport. Or they go to try to work for the international basketball, and they know a lot about basketball. I always tell these young people, listen, you cannot say anything about basketball that there's not someone in the International Basketball Federation that does not know that already. People in basketball working for in that case FIBA, they know quite a lot about basketball. So don't try to compete with that. People who work for our company, they know quite a lot about event bidding and hosting and communications. So don't try to compete with that. What do you know that we know less about, but we could use your knowledge? And this is much more like young people, you have to think across, like, okay, you know something about maybe data analytics, maybe you know something about trends changing in social media, maybe you know something about long-term planning in general in business that could be applied to sport, but don't try to come in and compete with sports professionals about sport. They know a lot about that already. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does, definitely. It's great advice. Actually, Sarah here agrees with me. So she says, great insights. Thanks for sharing. Lars, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have the Education Virtual Expo that is coming up. So I actually would like to ask you about the importance of education to someone pursuing a career in sport. I know that you teach in many courses, but I would like you to paint the real picture, of its importance.
I think it's really, as I said from the very beginning, in the old days, you were employed in my case, international volleyball, because you knew volleyball. That's not enough today. So you need education, and you need a lot. I am kind of getting older at least, and I'm still looking for what kind of executive learning training programs can I join. Education is really important, but I don't think that young people who want to work in sport, they necessarily need to study sport. You can study all kind of things. There's this notion about sports management, for me, it's management, and you can study management, and then you apply your management knowledge to sport or to another industry. So I think that the more you study, the better, and you have to keep learning new things also just to keep your mind fresh. And there's so many things changing all the times. You need to follow up with that. So whatever. And I always also say that, we always support our employees attending courses and seminars, because I used to say it has to be a really, really bad training course if you don't learn anything.
Yeah.
It has to be really, really bad. So you will always learn something. So I can only encourage, if people have the time and the resources, to invest in whatever education is available, and then you adapt it to the specific situation that you are in.
Yeah, totally agree. And of course, there's a formal type of education. There's informal as well. So knowledge is almost like a commodity nowadays. So if you know where to look, so I'm hopeful that, and I believe that people that have been watching us for this past hour definitely learned a few very, very important things here today. Now, Lars, the last one I'm going to give to Moses, who's asking another question here to us, and he asks you if you can recommend any book regarding sports organizations or working in sport. That's
well, I could recommend our own. I could recommend our own book.
Recommend books, but I'm going to leave Moses to do that today.
Pardon?
That's a question that I normally ask my guests at the end, but I'm going to leave it to Moses to ask this question today. That came from him.
Well, I could recommend our own book. We published a book in 2019. I think it was second or third edition. It's called The New Sports Organization. I think that's interesting. It covers many aspects of sports management. But if I should recommend a book for people who want to join sports organizations and provide advice to sport in general, I would turn to someone like our own advisory guru in our company, David Meister. He was an American who wrote books about professional service firms, and he wrote many books, but if there's one that I recommend, it's called, by David Meister, it's called The Trusted Advisor. It explains about how you learn by working to provide advice that is really valuable, and you move up the ladder so that because of the advice you provide is appreciated, you just become that kind of trusted advisor that people around you would like to listen to and would come to you for advice. I think that would be an interesting pathway for a young person entering into a sports world and building that career. So if it's one, I would say David Meister, The Trusted Advisor.
Great, Lars. And of course, let's people should read the TSC book that you published in 2019 as well. I'm actually going to add both of them at our resources at the iWorkinSport.com website. So people from tomorrow, when they go there, if they want to find out where to buy them, you can go there. There's a few others that they can also find there too. Lars, thank you so much. So Moses is also thanking us. I thought that was inspirational. As I said, Sarah said the same. We have a few other people who still with us watching. So thanks everyone that has been here with us. Lars, I can't thank you enough. That was very insightful for me personally, and I'm sure that's for people that were watching as well. I hope to see you soon in Lausanne in person, as we like to meet in person. When is the next barbecue?
Well, it has to be next year, yeah?
It has to be next year. All right. Thank you so much, Lars.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.